I'm a gun with the Go Gators.
Okay.
I was just checking to see if you were listening.
From Destrehan, Louisiana. Hold on a second.
Hey, guys! Hey! I'm having a press conference, okay? Thank you.
Momentum, excitement, energy. They say all this stuff and you know what they mean, but it doesn't describe what you mean. It's just sort of out there.
You got barbecue back there, and you didn't invite me. Hurt my feelings.
I was just worried about, listening to, all your guys' rap poison.
Welcome to Sideline Judgement. Here are your hosts, Sergio and Tyler.
Welcome to Sideline Judgement. My name is Sergio.
My name is Tyler.
And today, Tyler, it's been a while, but we're back, baby.
We are so back.
We
Never
we
been
are.
more back.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I missed this. Oh, buddy.
We went an entire college football season without podcasting. Now, it's not like we went an entire college football season without talking about college football, you and I.
No.
Those text messages were exchanged every Saturday and a lot during the week. But this is the first time that we are recording. We had some life stuff come up, not in a bad way. Good things, busy
You're
schedule.
both extremely busy. Me
Exactly.
Specifically working on the redacted that I was working on, which was pretty big.
Yes.
And
me working at work, trying to, get things together. I made a pretty big purchase this year, and so I had to make sure my ducks were in a row. And so we're growing up. We're doing life stuff, but that doesn't mean that we can't find time to talk about our beloved sport. There's been a lot of changes in our beloved sport, Tyler. One might say that our absence from recording was a silent protest from those things, but I am here to assure the public that that is not the case. We just had life,
life happens.
and so I think what we're going to do here in this episode, since it is the first episode back, since the preview episode we published way back when, I think it's going to be good, Tyler. We've kind of taken three different topics we wanted to talk about that kind of encapsulate what happened this season. The first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the parity in college football, right? Amongst the conferences, amongst the teams, players, all that kind of stuff. We're also going to talk a little bit about, I want to say, a sensitive subject regarding the feelings of certain schools in the southeastern part of the country, and just how
which we associate with one of them. But
we absolutely associate with one of them. But we just want to have a bit more of an honest conversation about what this season looked like for the SEC. Is it as oh my gosh, what's going on? Is it still a lot of I'm refusing to embrace what's actually happening? We'll talk about the SEC and how it kind of is a microcosm of what's going on in college football as a whole. And then we'll talk about the playoff. This is the first year we have a 12-team playoff. I know you and I are both pretty happy with what happened with the first ever playoff bracket as it came out, but obviously there's some teams that were left out. There's some situations that we think might be brewing in the future. I know that we have at least this structure for this season and for next season, because in 2026 they'll be kind of redoing it. We'll see what happens there, but we'll talk about the playoffs. We'll talk about the current playoff, what we're going to see here, how it reflects what happens during the season, and maybe what's going to happen in the future. So let's start, Tyler, by talking about that parity stuff. I said in the preview episode, that I was very excited to watch the Big 12 this year because I believed that it was going to be a lot of parity. And turns out that kind of happened.
Yeah.
But I don't just think it was confined to the Big 12. I think there was a lot of parity all around. And I think we'll start by, let me ask you, Tyler, what did you think of kind of the more, I don't know, anything can happen nature of college football this season that we had? What was your thoughts on the season as a whole when it comes to teams winning on any given Saturday?
I mean, it's definitely exciting. There's a small bit of the NFLification of it all that you could argue, which is that in the NFL, it's like, it's kind of an opposite of what has been the norm of college football. In the NFL, it's like, it is kind of assumed you are going to lose games.
Yeah.
Like, unless you're the Dolphins from the 70s, like you're going to lose games. And
I appreciate you specifying the decade. Thank you very much.
I don't remember the year. It's 72, right?
You know the year, and you know it's 72. What are you talking about? I say this all the time. I bring it up once a week.
But the point is that like what set college football apart, and this is part of the thing, is that like college football was where you really needed to have a like perfect, borderline perfect season to make the run that you need to make. And what we get now with the 12-team playoff, and more so with the parity that has been with the transfer portal and these new conference realignment has introduced into the sport, is this aspect of you don't really need to have a perfect season to get the season you want to have a shot at the title. You know, like if you're in the SEC, typically it's like you can lose one SEC game, maybe two if it's the right one, and make it to your conference championship game. And like even then, like if you have two losses, that's not a guarantee you can ever play for the national championship. Most often the time, it means that you're done. Yeah. And so the thing is, like you lose a little bit of the dream season aspect of it. The incredible highs, but also the incredible heartbreak of taking that second loss or that bad loss, while introducing a lot more, a lot more excitement on the week-to-week basis. I think, like even for the top, even for like Georgia, like Georgia had a real Georgia fans will probably tell you that a really tough schedule this year, and I don't really agree. I think they had a tough schedule. They had an SEC schedule. They didn't get an easy SEC schedule.
Kirby Smart did say,
I don't concern myself with what Kirby Smart says.
I just do think it's funny that he called out Greg Sankey when Greg Sankey was 10 feet away from him presenting the SEC championship game trophy. I do agree with you. Yeah, they went on the road to play Texas. Okay. Yeah, they played Alabama on the road, but like we'll talk about this in the SEC section, but like I agree with you. Please continue.
The point is, it's like you lose some of that, like the elite of the elite, but I did think it was interesting and it was fun how much more exciting and like upsets could happen, and like you really felt that in the Big 12, like going down to the final week, there was like 6 possible Big 12 championship scenarios. Like in the SEC, it came down to Georgia and then either Texas or Texas A&M, just because of like the certain conference losses they had. No one was really truly elite that season. First of all, amazing that Texas A&M was for a conference championship berth. That's just like what more could you ask for the first time?
Script writers were in their bag.
They knew what they were doing. But it's been like a lot more exciting games, a lot more like games that maybe would not have mattered previously matter more now for conference races, which is exciting.
I agree. You
lose a little, like I said, you lose a little bit of the high end, but you kind of make up for it in the middle.
But I think that that's healthier for college football. Now, I don't think that everything that happened this season is healthy for college football, but that is one aspect that I do think. The Big 12, you had 3 teams finish with at least 10 wins. You had 4 teams go 7-2 in the conference. Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State, Colorado. Like those were teams that you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams win at least 8 games overall. That's pretty good in terms of conference health for the Big 12. You look at the ACC. There we go. Excuse me. I like lost my tab. You look at the ACC and you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams go 5-3 or better in the conference. And you had 1, 2, 3 10-win teams, 2 9-win teams, and an 8-4 team. Like that's actually really good and a lot of parity. Even going down to the SEC, right? The SEC, like you said, had a lot of teams. They had 1, 2, 3, 4 teams that go 9-3, 3 teams that win at least 10 games, and 2 teams that go 8-4. That's pretty good. And that's not to mention Cinderella stories in the conference, like Florida in the back half of the year, like Arkansas going 6-6 and making a bowl. Vandy made a bowl game this year. Like there were some good stories deep down in the conferences, not just in the SEC, which we'll talk about in a second, but like there were some good stories overall. And I just think that it was a good year in terms of keeping the attention on teams that aren't just those 7 or 8 teams. Now I understand there's people that maybe don't like the expansion because they say, like you said, You remove those high highs, right? You remove the quote unquote best on best. But I think it's a fundamental perception of what college football should be and what you want college football to be as a fan. Everybody has different tastes, and that's perfectly fine. But I think this sport is a sport that is very, very well distributed in terms of storylines across the country and at different levels. And honestly, I think the transfer portal and the fact that, you know, a player that may be third string on an SEC offensive line might go to an ACC school or a lower level Big Ten school or a high level American school and be a starter at some of those places and be able to make some money while doing it. You know, like I just think it's better to kind of spread out the talent level instead of having.
It does feel like the talent level has equalized in a lot of areas. Not fully. It's not been NFLified, but like,
Correct.
But it is getting better.